Good morning, everyone. Good morning again, and welcome to Rise and Shine Sundays. We're glad you're here. For those of us in North America, this was time change Sunday. So some of us are rising and shining at different times today. But all of us are here for our weekly gathering. We're glad to have you with us, where we have a central question that we take a look at that are all built around personal transformation and growth. This particular week, we are focusing on the concept of thresholds. For those of you who have been tuned in early, can you honor thresholds, yours and others? Now, the word thresholds may be unique to some people. We all know about the concept of pushing each other's buttons, right? But one of the things that happens after transformation is that your capacity changes. What you used to tolerate, you can't tolerate anymore. Not because you're being difficult or oversensitive. You're When you've transformed, there is a whole different neurological thing going on with you. There are all sorts of different awarenesses. You may be more acutely aware of the buttons that get pushed in your world. And there are certain things you will and you won't accept. For our discussion this morning, we're calling those things thresholds. And what we're inviting you to take a look at today is to recognize when your body is sending you a signal about what your threshold is, and even more importantly, to begin to use your awareness to understand what's happening in all the relationships that you come to. You're going to recognize that all sorts of people have very different thresholds than you do. And we're inviting you again to consider what's possible when you honor your own thresholds, how to identify them in real time, and how to navigate the world in and around all of those potential button pushings and threshold crossings. So, with me in the round table this morning, um, my esteemed colleagues from around North America and the world. I am happy to. I'm going to start right here next to me and say good morning, Ray.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here.
How are you waking up on the threshold of the time change?
I feel like I lost an hour somewhere.
We'll get back that hour in this hour. And I see a good smile on the face from our dear friend Sang. Good morning.
Good morning. How is everybody?
We're good. We're good. Do you feel like this is the time change is bringing you into a new threshold for yourself?
I love time change for both. I love both of them for probably different reasons, which makes me different. But I love it because one, I love the daylight, so now I get to get. I'm a morning person, so I get to be up in the morning and do all the things. So I love it here.
Well, and again, as I said, North America got the chance to change and go through this on for Rise and Shine Sundays, but our good friends across the pond, Ollie, it is still the same time as it was before, correct?
No, because we have a dance. Each 2 times a year we have a dance. The US come first, and then we come last. But in 2 weeks, I will change the time, myself in
Mhm.
Europe, which means that we have to dance twice. Once because we have to adapt to our fellow Americans who is having that 2 weeks before us, and then ourselves. So normally it's I would say good evening because normally it's 5 p.m. But right now for 2 weeks it's 4 p.m. So it's good afternoon.
Delicious, delicious. So we were invited, I guess, Ollie, to do a pas de deux this morning, right? A dance of two?
Why not? It takes two to dance tango
Here you
or
go.
salsa.
Here you go. Well, and it also sometimes takes two to get buttons pushed, right? I know a lot of us talk about this whole concept of once we've gone through a significant change in our lives, our tolerance level drops significantly. And it's partially as we're emerging into something new, right? And so I guess if our discussion about honoring thresholds, it's just that recognition, when you've recognized that maybe you've crossed the line, maybe you're experiencing something in a relationship or within yourself where you feel like you're pushing when it used to be kind of effortless. Um, I always like to begin with the person who has the most uh, thoughts and observations that are the most potent. Sang, does this resonate with anything for you this morning?
Yes, of course. I want to first. I'm going to start off by saying that I always want to start with the definitions of
Okay.
things, right? So that for me, it helps me understand, so that anybody who's listening understands where I'm coming from when I speak, right? So, one, I want to address transformation, right? Because everybody can hear all the things that are in society, right? Transformation, these things. And I just want to, people can say, oh, I've transformed, I've done this. And all I can think about is Transformers from back in the day, right? It was a little car and all of a sudden a robot, right? Like, okay, cool, right? But nobody talks about the process of what it took that transformer to go from the car to that. So, because now I'm a car who has a function, and now I'm a giant who has a feeling. So transformation is that change, right? A change. So for me, it's when life changes you in a way that's not just mental, right?
Mhm.
Your body, it is in your body. You, again, like you're talking about tolerating, processing. We don't respond in the same way. It could be, I know when my mom passed, it was in one of those situations, right? Where like I just was like, here we are. And then things kind of gradually shift because you don't change overnight. There are some things that do change like that overnight, but there's a sense of transformation there. Capacity, right, is what we hold true without overriding yourself, right? Very different from threshold, right? So I'm going to talk about threshold.
Can you say that again slowly?
So
Capacity.
capacity is what I hold right now without overriding myself, meaning a boundary. Like I think about capacities and boundaries, right? I don't have the capacity to have a conversation with you today, Ray, because I'm just tapped. And then that's for me to say, I don't have capacity, right? I don't have capacity to do the other 15 tasks that I've been asked to do at work because I don't have the capacity to do it, right? And then threshold, which is very fascinating, is one, it's not a word that we typically use in everyday language,
Yeah,
right?
correct.
No, it's not like anybody wakes up and is like, hey, how's your threshold happening today? Right? They'd probably look at you and go, what? So it is it's definitely a personal word to use because threshold is the moment that my body tells me that I've reached the edge of something and of that capacity.
Hmm.
So, and that's why sometimes some of these words are used interchangeably, which is why I like to go back to good old Webster, who's taught me since the beginning of time what words mean and how we're actually using them. And that's why I feel like it's always clear, but you'll always hear me say, what does that mean to you? Because again, it comes down to what I've talked about before, that shared vocabulary, that shared understanding of another person's experience is, because someone else may describe those things very differently. For
Hmm.
me, that's my definitions for those. So that's where we are with that.
That is so beautifully done, and thank you again for always starting us off on the right energetic thread, because we do want to look at those key definitions as we're beginning to have a conversation about something,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
Because we can instantly realize that when I use a word, again, threshold is not something that, but you said it so beautifully, which is the threshold is the recognition when your capacity for something meets either your own standard or someone else's, and so if we look at that whole idea of transformation, your acknowledgement of your own capacity,
mhm.
uh, there is that felt sense, right? Because a threshold is a felt sense. It isn't a hard line, right? But I want to throw a little question that was just brought us to, when someone's at their limit with a few things, uh,
Mhm.
they will continue to work through that limit, which means that they get very focused and reflective. I must minimize distraction. So what Jessica's talking about this morning as it relates to thresholds is that we're really honoring this sort of idea that it's kind of like a wave that these thresholds come into contact. Sometime we're able to, we have, like you've said, saying the capacity to do things, but sometimes certain people can enter our aura, certain things can be happening that
Mhm.
diminish all of that. And so again, there's what Jessica is so beautifully saying, and this is you adjust your countenance. Can I use the word countenance without people going, hey, we need to go and take a, but we
Yeah.
we adjust we adjust our way of moving through the world based on the awareness of that threshold. Is that fair?
Yes. And even what Jessica's saying, so she's saying also in the next comment, she's talking about how she knows when she reaches her limit, she has to make a decision what to do for herself.
Mm-hmm.
That is where, knowing Jessica personally is where we live in our bodies, right? Is we have to know, this is that self-awareness. That's exactly what you're talking about, Jamie, is what do I need right now? Right? Is this, and again, going back to, is this emotionally driven or is this capacity? Right? Because if we think about, if we fill up a water bottle, right? If the water bottle gets to the top, that's capacity. But if we keep trying to fill it up, we're trying to put the lid on it, then there's pressure, right? And if we think about in our daily lives, right? If you are at capacity, you're like, I can't go anymore, right? But then when someone external, typically is what happens, something external happens that tips us over the threshold, right? And then that's when we have to go, what do I do with this? Do
Mm-hmm.
I then say, I don't have capacity for this? Or do I allow something that, and I want to say allow, but if someone said something that now has triggered me and now my emotions are all over the place and now I can't do this and now I can't do that. And then it becomes, what do I do? Right?
And Ollie's beginning metaphor about the time change just sprung back into my mind, which is it's that dance. You know what I mean? It's the dance with the threshold. It's
Mhm.
recognizing that it's not a fixed line, that sometimes you're at a different capacity than someone else. Ollie, does that ring true? I mean, I hate to bring you back from the metaphor just so beautifully set with the time change, but do you see the idea that a threshold is sort of like a dance?
Exactly, and what a great metaphor also about the waves, because it's about knowing also the weather, the external conditions aside as in internal condition, which means that in any given day or any given hour, we have to figure out first how I feel internally, because if I'm depleted, it doesn't make sense for me to charge me about things that I envision to do or external not external not planned events. So it's really to tap into the body wisdom, and then the external event. Like if you know that it's going to rain a lot, you are going to adjust. You are not going to take the usual light cloth. You are going to take your umbrella. So it's a dance between knowing internal and knowing external. And it's also the best thing also to realize. I've seen a lot of people sometimes trapped is that we knowing the external conditions like as the moon there is the waves. The waves come and goes. It's like mare, the sea that goes up and the sea that goes down, and then people go to the shore and they walk, but they don't realize that the sea will come in 30 minutes, and there are some people that are trapped with that because they are not anticipating, oh, but the sea will cover this in 30 minutes, or moving sands also in the sea that people are not aware. So
Right.
it's really to recognize internally and externally, and to be able to adjust, and also to make people understand. If I say to you yes 60 times, it might not mean that the 61st time I will say yes, because I can change depending on the circumstance. So
Yeah.
it's also boundary, a threshold is adjustable, which means that it's not a constant. It's
Yep.
something that's fluctuating.
Yeah, yeah, and you just put on the brilliance of the difference between a boundary and a threshold. Now, I want to make sure I know there's some people who are just joining us. We're talking about can you honor thresholds, yours and others, and in our roundtable discussion, we're about to add a new person into the roundtable to give us go from a quartet to a quintet here in a second. But I want to pick up on two things that were said when you're saying we're talking about how well, we live in our bodies. And when Ollie was going, well, we have to check in with our body wisdom. That is actually a wonderful masterclass in terms of how to manage thresholds, right? Because you can set boundaries, but you live in this fluidity of thresholds, right? Ray, did you? And
Yeah.
I'm going to bring a guest in here in a minute, but I want to make sure that you had a chance to talk about that difference between, well, my head knows where that boundary is, but my body knows that there's a threshold somewhere. Do you want to speak a little bit to that difference?
I really like the metaphors that have surfaced: dancing, tides, external forces, internal forces, because I think that helps me process. Oh, okay, so it's more than. So the minute you sort of get into the understanding the dynamics, you're in a better position to listen to
Hmm.
your body knowledge, as
Mhm.
well as to the external forces. Because I think the challenge we have is it's tough enough figuring out what's happening within yourself, and then with all these crazy external forces that come into play. But I think both Sang and Ollie and you, Jamie, uh, really brought open a wider understanding of, okay, I manage this part of it, but the tide might shift. So,
Right,
so am I understanding? Am I aware and feeling,
right,
body,
right.
what's going on? So yeah, so to me that was very, very valuable to listen and understand from the perspective of dance,
Mhm.
tidal, flow, waves, essentially.
Well, and again, we deal so much in pop psychology where we think it's an all mental process, right? I've set a boundary in my head, therefore it's just going to be automatic. I'm going to apply it. My therapist told me I need to set boundaries. My best friend Sang told me I need to set boundaries. Everybody keeps telling me to set boundaries, but oh my God, I have to live in a world where there's thresholds. So let's get in some added perspective here from a person who has helped a lot of people kind of understand their. Good morning, Stacy. Thank you for
Good
joining.
morning.
How are you?
I am. It's different morning in Kansas City than it was yesterday.
Mhm. We have crossed the threshold of
We,
time change.
we have definitely danced across the threshold.
Was there, as you were listening to come into the studio, was there something that was on your mind this morning?
Uh, I love the beautiful connection that's been made already about dancing and um, thinking about our bodies
Hmm.
because I mean, I'm not a dancer at all. Um, don't play one on TV even. But the ability to tap into what's going on in our body is not something, just like following our emotions or even naming our emotions is not taught to us as kids. And so I think learning all of those things helps so much in how we learn how to dance in the world. Mhm.
Agreed. Agreed. I'm sure there's something that's sprung to Sang's mind since the last time we heard from you. What's come up?
Well, I'm just going to give you because it's all, this is the hardest part. The hardest part, I think, is for everyone and most people is understanding where that lives in your body and also being able to express what that is to others and realizing that they are either going to receive that or they're not. And I have an example, a medical example. When I was giving birth to my daughter, which clearly there's a transformation there, right, happening. My body, I knew there was something not okay,
Hmm.
right? And I remember saying it to them and saying, something's not right, right? And they were like, oh no, you're fine. Right? And I was like, nope, something, this isn't normal. This doesn't feel like I'm about to push a baby out. Like, this isn't it. And they were like, no, you're fine. It's just labor. Right? And I want you to think about how people will do this to you when you try to tell them that something is not okay for you.
Mhm.
So again, so my capacity was I'm about to have this baby. I know what my body is capable of, right? But then there was a moment where I was like, something's not right, right? And then lo and behold, I probably pushed maybe 3 times and things were not okay, right? And then it became for me, why wouldn't they listen? Because they couldn't see it, right? They were having to trust what I was doing, but they thought because my body was about to give birth that I could not possibly know what was going on, right? And this is where you have to trust yourself and
Mhm.
knowing what your limit is, right?
Hmm.
What your threshold is. What are you no longer wanting to like? If you like, Joe, I don't want to have this conversation with you anymore because it's really starting to. My mind is going blah 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 blah. I'm starting to say things I don't want to say. I'm starting to just just all these things, and then that's when, like what Jamie was talking about in the beginning, pushing buttons. Like there are people who like to go bing
Mm-hmm.
bing
or ping.
and you're like, and I've had it recently, and I'm just like, oh, okay. Is that and then it was my brother. He was like, I said, God, you're talking here. I need you to be here. He's like, that's not my problem. That's your problem. And I'm like, cool, no problem. Because now I know where he receives it versus where he does not.
Right.
And then I get to decide, do I keep a boundary? Right? Have I really reached a bodily threshold where it's like I can't now handle this conversation? Because there was a time where I'd be like, dude, I'm hanging up on you now.
Right. Right.
And that's when I knew. So I think understanding and really trying to figure out how that sits for you when you're in arguments, when you're arguing with your loved ones, you're arguing with people, or those external people come in. And this is, again, it all goes back to yourself. What
Right.
do you know about yourself? How
Right.
do you feel when certain people push your buttons?
Right.
If you know that Jackie Chan comes over and wants to kung fu fight every day, but you don't, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah.
everything you're pointing to, saying it
Yeah.
reminds us over and over again that thresholds aren't boundaries;
Correct.
they're discoveries.
Yep. And boundaries really are those things that you intentionally set.
Mm-hmm.
You say, I don't call me after 7 p.m. because I don't have 3 minutes. Or, or don't call me after 7 p.m. because I'm going to bed.
And
And
the other side of what you invited us to take a look at, however, was that your body knows thresholds sometimes before you do, and
yeah.
certainly
Oh, yeah.
sometimes before other people do, right? Because, we get into, please jump in if there's been a time when you've recognized that your body recognized the threshold before you did. Anyone?
Y'all don't do otherwise I'm gonna keep talking.
Stacey's got the look on her face right now because
It's the processing look. It's like, I don't know if I have one about that, because the only thing I thought of while saying was talking about was a story I had, and they where people didn't listen to me.
well, let's talk
And
about it. Let's see if it
well,
wraps in.
it's basically a similar story. It was a medical scenario. It was it was a cardiac stress test
Mm-hmm.
where I knew that whatever medicine they were going to give me would act similar to epinephrine in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I have a sensitivity to it.
Yep.
And so I said, that's going to make me faint. And they're like, no, it's a different drug. It won't make you faint.
Mm.
And so here I am in this like easy chair thing, hooked up to heart equipment,
Mm-hmm.
look across the room, and the room started spinning. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. Literally, I had that thought. And then I woke up with them freaking out.
Right.
And because I had fainted.
Right.
Imagine that. I knew what was going to happen before it even did, tried to tell them about my own body, and they, and to me it was a fun adventure, because then I was like, this is going to be fun to see what happens when I wake up.
What both of your stories beautifully illustrate in medical situations, sometimes where our power is taken, like in other words, we've given ourselves over to a situation where we hope that people can see us and we have to advocate for ourselves. That's an important, if we can look at boundary setting as one thing, but the threshold, the discovery that you had in that moment in both of those stories, right? And that's when you, if you will, from the discovery that both of you had in those situations, you're able to sort of communicate the threshold. Excuse me. And I think that's, it's when we are at our most vulnerable, when we have, quote, been pushed, again, you used the word so beautifully in the beginning when you were talking about capacity, saying, and the idea that you're taken to your limits. That threshold is what you discover what your limit is, right? And it is very much what you live through, right? And so we have those dramatic examples when in medical situations when our body really just has to say, "Whoa, wait," you know, because it not only has a boundary been crossed, but a threshold is. What
Right.
would it be like if we were as sensitive to what our body signals are sending us when that really irritating person comes back into our field again? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'll say I could use my example of taking naps, right?
Okay.
When I was younger, I would tell my kids, "Do not wake me up from my nap." Because if you wake me up from my nap, I'm going to be pissed off. I am going to lose my marbles, and it's not going to be pretty for anybody, right?
Mhm.
Because again,
Mm.
now I'm communicating. There's my boundary. I already know my own threshold that if you wake me up out of this nap that I did not fully get, right, this is going to happen. Unfortunately, my son pushed a few buttons. It happens. He remembers. I remember Angel telling him, don't wake her up, right? But if we talk about something in the everyday life, like think about house chores, right? You go in the, everybody has a dirty kitchen. I don't know. My kitchen gets dirty and I don't even know how that happens. But you go in the kitchen and you're like, I have this many things to do, I have this many things to do, and I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do that in the kitchen. But I will clean up the kitchen and that will be that. However, there's a point sometimes where you're like, something else could be happening, but then it's like, why is this kitchen dirty? Why is this? I'm not good enough. I'm not this. And then you just start having this flood of feelings that happen. And that's
Mm.
self, right? But imagine if you lived with people, right? And they're not doing the dishes. Or, now you're irritating. Let's say you're in the cabinet, you're shutting the cabinets and slamming the cabinets around and doing all this. And there's like, what's wrong with her?
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? Because you've reached a point of there's something going on, whether that's internal, external, that you have now, but it's also something to recognize in self. Go, why am I irritated about this kitchen? Something as simple as the kitchen.
Well, I think Stacy actually put something in the chat, which was nice to be able to have people who are in the roundtable also chatting. Our limits, our thresholds aren't fixed. They change with lots of variables, 24/7, 365. Ray, does that bring out anything for you?
Yeah, what the gang here started making me think of is my listening isn't always
Mm.
uh, working at full capacity, because sometimes you lose
Mhm.
track of, and each story and each example is, are others listening to you, are you listening to the others? And there starts to be a mismatch, because if they're not listening to you, they're headed sometimes in the wrong direction. Or if you're not listening to them, you're not in a better position to start to respond, as Sang said, is to say, well, wait a minute, we're drifting here to something I don't want to drift to.
Right. Hmm.
But the listening is so important, and I think
Hmm.
it gets lost so easily.
Well, and Ray, you're talking about something. I'm ripped out my pencil, so you know it's going to be important. Because you're talking about what I
Big
call
one.
deaf channels.
Yes.
There, when you're expressing what goes on in the world, sometimes you can communicate until the cows come home. But again, some people's thresholds for listening are way down here, and your threshold for communicating is way up here, and you're dealing with a deaf channel at that particular point in time. Where, and I think that that's also an important thing to recognize as we're doing the dance with people, as Stacy said, 365, 24/7, when we're recognizing that our boundaries are set by ourselves internally, but they live in discoveries and threshold moments with other people. And then you again recognize that some people don't have the capacity. And even though you are clearly doing everything in your power to communicate, advocate, express, and listen, you know what? Sometimes other people are just deaf to that. That's
Mm.
also something to recognize. Who does that? Yeah, Stacey, go ahead.
It reminds me of doing advocacy for clients for years because a good part of what I don't those who may or may not know whether that I've been a social worker for 30 years, and a good part of what we learn, what we do, who we are is advocating for others individually as groups, again with each other. If you're dealing with families, you might be advocating for the parents with the teenager, or vice versa. But also, and moreover, modeling advocacy and teaching advocacy to others. I grew up in a medical family, so
Mhm.
advocating for myself in a medical situation was like breathing to me. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until I was into my career even that I realized that other people don't intrinsically learn how to medically advocate for themselves.
Mhm.
Right? So, like, a very specific kind of advocacy. And so I got to thinking about what Sang says, the whole capacity thing. You may have the capacity for it, you just haven't had the learning,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I go by the principle that anybody I speak to has the capacity to learn it, or to do that if they want to. It's
Yeah, but what you're also talking about, though, you use the word learn, and I think we have to recognize here that the term we use here, modernity, to sort of explain the world that we live in, right? Our
Mhm.
culture worships people pushing through just one more thing, tough it out, don't be so sensitive,
Mhm.
right? It's as if entire organizational systems will collapse if you don't honor your own. It's like, hey, you're screwing things up here, right? People get uncomfortable, people demand, just like you were, hey lady, just lay back, you're having a baby, right? don't don't bother us. We're just
You'll be
doing.
all right.
Yeah. Right.
And so that learning that you're talking about, which I'm 100% with you. Once you've had that discovery of sort of advocating for others, that's a skill and that's a technique. But I think a lot of the people that we are encountering, and ourselves included, are so conditioned to just tough it out, push it through. Hey,
Oh yeah.
lady, get back in the chair. Can you smile more, ma'am? That might help you. We need we need you to not deviate.
Yeah.
Anyone, go, please.
Mhm.
Who's got a response?
Oh, well, I'm always gonna bring it back to an everyday thing so we can, because not everybody has the medical situations and not everybody has, a dirty kitchen. I don't know. But really about relationships, right? And relationships, because I'm pretty sure all of us are in relationships in some capacity, right? Whether you have friendships, business ships, whatever they are, right? There's some sort of interaction with others. And does anybody ever remember telling someone 500 times what you need or things like that? And then you have to tell them 10 different ways. And you're like, how many more times do I have to tell you? How many more ways do I need to tell you this is what it is? And you get to the point where what do we say? I'm tired of repeating myself. Right? And then you're like, okay, I'm going to tell this person one more time. Right? Now that's capacity, right? I'm going to tell them one more time.
Mhm.
Okay? Maybe two, because sometimes we have to give ourselves a buffer. And then the threshold is you've seen it, you've said it 500 times, they don't get it, they're not going to get it. You can't keep getting mad about it. So now, and then you become drained. You're pissed off. You're like, you feel dismissed. You feel like you're not heard. You feel like you're not seen. And then what does that turn into? You've now reached a threshold where I just don't want to do this anymore. And then
Mhm.
that's what Jessica was talking about. At that point, you have a choice to make. Are
Mhm.
you going to keep having a conversation with someone who's not actively listening? Thank you, Ray, for saying that. They're not actively and attentively listening to really understand what you're trying to say, even though you've said it every which way possible for them to understand.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
because they're not getting it, we become frustrated because it's like, what the I've said it, and then that's realizing, because again, as you keep having those conversations, your body goes, what? And then finally, when it starts relaxing, and I'm going to tell you that when your body starts relaxing, you're tapped out. You're
Mhm.
tapped out because you're like, here we go again.
Well, and again, one of the things I love how, again, everything emerged today for this to be a discussion about the dance of a threshold. Because I think that it is really important of recognizing that sometimes you have to, even though you have communicated sometimes what your boundaries are and what your limits, it is kind of a fluid situation. Let me remind you, right? Let me remind you that this is, as we dance across thresholds and recognize, oh, somebody else can't dip. Somebody else doesn't have the capacity to listen to us in this moment.
Mhm.
And there is that sort of fluidity, but all of those answers come through lived experience. I wanted to invite some of the people as we're in, as you may be with us, joining us in the chat. We're talking about honoring thresholds within ourselves and others. And what we're discussing here today is that thresholds aren't boundaries; they're discoveries. And if there's been something that you've been discovering, you'd like to put it in the chat, we'd be happy to incorporate your perspectives into our conversations, because that's what we do here on Rise and Shine Sundays. Is we have a question, because there are very few places in the world right now where you can go to be heard, seen, valued, and appreciated, right? And I think that one of the things we want to in these conversations is to recognize that we're dancing. Believe it or not, we're also, the five of us are sitting here in circles, but we're dancing with each other, right? In a conversation around a topic. And again, the beautiful thing that's, Ollie, we were talking about the time change, and we realized that whole metaphor of the dance was something that was very, very valuable, right? And you sometimes have to dance differently in different situations, right? And I think that's, yeah, Ollie, please.
Yeah, I'm politely dancing and rising and shining my hand to share because I've been having to refrain myself to overcome my story. But it will be short. But when Sang shared about her story about people not listening to her, about something that her body was telling her. I had the same 12 years ago. The day before, I was probably taking my laptop with my shoulder, and I was feeling really depleted. But I was carrying on, and the next day I was waking up, but really unease. Wherever I stand up or I slept, I was really having some pain, and in fact, it occurs that my lung was having a hole,
Mhm.
and hopefully it was air, it was not liquid, because with liquid it could infect. But and then I was feeling so at unease that I asked my dad to go to the GP, and then really I was really difficult to breathe. I was white, and my GP says, "Oh, I will prescribe you antibiotics if it's not going to do good in 24 hours. You can go to the emergency." As soon as I was getting out, I told my dad, "Right now, we go to the emergency right now," because I was feeling that my body will not be able. And he was parking, and normally I love to walk, but there I was probably walking 20 centimeters per second, and it was like really difficult to breathe. And then it led to have me diagnosed pneumothorax, 5 days in the hospital because of my lung hole. And so imagine if I was not being self-advocate for myself, if I
Mhm.
was allowing this GP to do his things, because when you say listening, it's not only listening verbally, it's also listening with the nonverbal. My GP was seeing me like that, and
Mhm.
he said he didn't say go to the emergency. So it's really to advocate to ourselves and to listen to our body. How could we listen to others and or allowing ourselves to know our limits if we don't listen to our body, because it's a vehicle. Most of the time we are here, but our body is also way below.
Mhm.
So that's I wanted to share my part. I want to share. So that's it.
No, Ali, and you do that so beautifully, and thank you for that share. Because what you're reminding us is the cost of crossing your own threshold.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Does that make
Mhm.
sense? Because we're taught to ignore those signals, right? Oh, well, I ran this by somebody. They said, oh, that doesn't matter, right? And every time you override a threshold, your nervous system screams louder, right? And,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's as if you're learning, my signals don't matter. My signals don't matter. I have to scream louder. And, that's how you end up with panic attacks and chronic illnesses and complete shutdowns, right?
Mhm.
Your body is desperately trying to get you to listen, right? Why is it that whenever I'm in this presence, I and we also have to recognize that we cannot change the world. You're going to come. Do you remember there's a show in America called Nickelodeon, right? There's a network called Nickelodeon, and they used to have this thing where they would drop slime out of the.
That show.
And oftentimes, when we've crossed our own threshold, or when we are literally getting slimed, right? And
Yeah.
there is a moment when we have to kind of clean ourselves, right? And I think that that's why you can have this confrontation or this situation with a dear friend. You cross your threshold, but you end up being irritable, right? 3 weeks later, you're still tense over it, right? You didn't clean off the slime from that particular situation.
Mhm.
There is that energetic cost to crossing your own threshold. Please, what's emerging?
JB, I don't think I'll ever let anybody cross my threshold again after that. Because listen, I never wanted to be on that show, but I can't even. Ugh, I can't now. I don't know. I'm like, oh my, I can feel it. That's the thing. So since my recent events, I can feel certain things happening in my body, and it happens in this nerve in the back of my head, right? And hearing that, and because like when you think, first of all, how long does it take to wash all that slime off? Right? Forever. It's gonna be caked in my hair. It's gotta probably be in crevices I didn't know it belonged in, right? And you know what I'm saying? And now I've gotta, and so now my visual is I will definitely be able to say, I'm not crossing that threshold because I don't want to be slimed, right?
And again, the master class just been delivered by saying that's what we're trying to get you to that point is your body just like I was just saying the body's keeping the score, right? Which is a wonderful book in case you've ever wanted to take a look at it, right? But part of that is exactly what you just said, is that you unequivocally know now it's not just a boundary, it's a threshold that has an energetic cost to me that I'm not willing to. I see you nodding, Ray. Was there something you wanted
Oh,
to?
just one of the things that surfaced when you were when everyone was sharing their experiences with experts is sometimes we defer our ourselves to
Mhm.
experts when we should maybe call it into question, as like the GP with Ollie, the birthing team with Sang, is that they're not listening and they're not seeing,
Mm.
um, or feeling what's going on, and I think we all have experiences where somebody is dismissive because they perceive themselves as an expert knowing more than you, so the listening gets turned off. So I'm not saying all experts are wrong, but I'm basically saying that we have to listen to the body first, because if you're seeing a medical expert as an example, or
Mhm.
somebody else, like how many times do we even with other experts, doesn't matter what it is that doesn't feel right to me, right?
Yeah. And
Mhm.
thresholds are
Mhm.
self-verified. Thresholds are self-verified. They
Mhm.
don't they don't live in the like, oh, I'm going to set this boundary. My good friend Sang told me I need to stop putting myself in those situations. So I'm going to remember that up here as a boundary. That's great to have a boundary. That's really important.
Well,
But
I'm gonna slime, for example, for the rest of my life now. Because literally that I can't even fathom that. Like I'm thinking about that, I can't stop thinking about it. Because to think that every time I've crossed a threshold that I get slimed, I'm not okay with that.
well, and again, you go back to recognizing it is, for me, I'll give you the positive spin on this, right?
Uh-huh.
Some of you know that I have a tendency to talk, right?
Say
What
it
a
ain't so.
surprise. And I call it my happy puppy energy.
Yeah.
I realize that sometimes I like, oh, I have this puppy. I would like for you to see this puppy. I really want to share this puppy with you, right? And what I've done, if I'm not checking out the boundary of somebody else, some people, the famous line from Jerry Maguire, right? You had me at hello, right? He's going through that whole speech, right? Sorry, I know maybe you brought up another movie, which could be another trigger. But what I'm saying about my happy puppy energy is that sometimes people's thresholds to receive what we have in a positive way are vastly different than our capacity to give, right? And so sometimes, you know, there are wonderful there are wonderful little pieces of wisdom. I know we've been talking about thresholds in a negative way, but there are also thresholds in, if you will, a positive way.
Yeah.
When you want to do so much, right, and you're recognizing that other people just don't have the capacity to receive that, and that, so in other words, it's the difference between, and maybe I think Stacey and I think I may have said this in front of you. It's the difference between somebody wants a drink and you give them a fire hose when all they really wanted was the little tiny trickle on the water fountain, right? And
Wow.
so it's I believe I said that to you one morning in coffee. You know, like sometimes I turn on the fire hose when really I just need a little. I needed a sip. You know. So anyone else, does that happen to?
Yeah.
I share that affliction.
Yeah. I want to share how you can still honor your giving nature, hold a boundary, know your threshold, and still give. Right? Like saying, how is that possible? Right? It is possible. I do it. I've learned how to do this. If someone comes to me and needs something, and I'm at capacity, I've had 15 other things going on, I have capacity, right? I will say, I'm not able to do that. However, here are 5 resources for you, or here are 2 other people that you could go talk to, right? So now you're still giving another resource, and then also you're ultimately connecting them somewhere else. You're not saying, I don't care. You're not saying, F off, right? You're not saying that. You're not saying, I can't do this anymore, right? It's, I am not able to do it. However, here's something I can give you. Because, and so then you still, to me, for myself, I know I still walk away fulfilled because I've given them something. And I can't tell you how many times people have come back and said, oh my gosh, thank you for that resource, or thank you for connecting me to so and so. Because I tell people all the time, I have like this $3 million hard drive over here, and I know a lot of stuff. I have a lot of resources, and if I don't know, I know somebody else who has the other half of what I don't know. Right?
Yeah, and it's sometimes not just listening.
Mhm.
I think there's another skill that we talk about called read the room.
Mhm.
Does Ali, does that expression translate well? Do you want? Is there a French equivalent or another language equivalent of read the room? It's not landing well.
Well, I have a whole different perspective about read the room.
Uh,
Another topic for another day, I think.
okay. Well, to me, that's the idea is to use your awareness,
Yeah,
right?
of
To
course.
filter when you've had an understanding from other people, and I think that that concept is carrying the awareness that you have about yourself,
Yeah,
in doing the dance. Oh, my partner isn't responding. Let me force them into something, right? That dance is not very comfortable for anyone.
that always works, I've heard. I
Yeah,
always
and
go back to Dirty Dancing where, they're in the studio and she's like, this is my space, this is your space. Let's cha-cha.
Yeah.
Because if
Um,
and
you look at that as how we are now, I'm dealing with what I'm dealing with. You're dealing with what you're dealing with. We can still be in communication. We can still talk. We can still have we can still be in relationship and still find that medium to where to have a conversation. But there is that individuality there.
yeah. Ollie, please. What you saying?
it's also to realize if we are caught in the drama triangle, savior, victim, persecutor, to really realize, oh, am I playing the savior right now? Because sometimes I do, and but I tend to be the savior, but I don't finally I cannot really help, or I don't have the capacity to help, but I overcome my capacity just to be the savior. So it's also interesting about the to tap into the Kaufman drama triangle, and to say, okay, do I do the same, or am I just really able to help? So that's my share. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go, Ray, please.
I just want both Ollie and saying I think there's a big dimension there is when Sang basically said, well, I can't help you with that, or there's something else that I can share with you. That's creating options to
Mhm.
open up a bigger conversation, because the individual is essentially saying, I want this from Sang. And Sang's response is, I can't or won't or don't want to or whatever. Um, well, it's true. It's at some point you say, I don't want to do that. But you're created the options, which is the beauty of it, because that kind of creates that pause, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
The
Uh-huh.
pause and the switch to
Right.
another conversation or another situation.
Yeah.
And just as it is all the time, there's a wonderful comment that came in from Jessica here, and I think this is sort of where we may kind of like land the discussion today, as it came up several times in the last few days in her shows and events and conversations. Awareness is only the very first step,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
However,
Your word.
However, about that is that the invitation is to practice through that awareness. And sometimes that's what happens is that it is the first step. And sometimes we're invited, even in present moments, just like you were saying, Ray, we stumble into something. We thought we had set a boundary. Um, we don't want to get slimed. We have that really strong messaging from saying that no, not going to happen for me this time. And sometimes we just have to be able to find that pause again, take that breath, you know, and recognize that we're here in this moment, you know, and we're going to practice that awareness, right? And so that you know how you feel yourself, to borrow Sang's expression, when you're at capacity. What
Yeah.
does that feel like? What does that look like when you're, oh, you know what? My husband, my partner, my coworker is really at their threshold, right? And I can see that. Now I don't need to be, poly perfect and say, "Hey, Stu, you're at your threshold," right? Because again, nobody wants your happy puppy protective energy because there was no invitation for you to point out anything. It's for you to have that awareness so that you can adjust your dance, right?
Uh-huh.
I see you smiling, saying, "What else?"
I know, because we could definitely go in a different way in that way. I will say awareness is definitely number one. Awareness of self, awareness of others. Um, we are so much. Um, I don't like to use the word trained, but it's just how we are. We
Fishing.
conditioned. That's the word I was looking for. Thank
Yeah.
you. We are so conditioned and brought up to read the room that we are constantly having to watch what other people are doing and not focus on ourselves, which is why right now it is so hard for us to go inward and go, what am I feeling? Because I've been taking care of this person and taking care of that person and taking care of this, and I've been monitoring this person's feelings and that person's feelings and doing this. And I'm only saying that because as a mom, that's what I do. But and it's like it gets exhausting, right?
Mhm.
And that exhaustion is where we throw up the towel and we're like, I'm leaving, I'm going to get ice cream. Right? I don't want to be slime.
And as we've learned in this, as our hour kind of wraps down, you have just actually planted the seeds for our next
I
discussion
know I did.
already. Um,
That's fine.
which is
Mhm.
after that trauma, after the trauma of something that's happened, right? This ability, after staying, if you're in reading the room, hypervigilance all of the time, all right? And I really want to explore that next week because I think that is something that people who have been through trauma don't recognize, that they have a superpower that most other people don't. And that is that they have constantly had to scan the room, to read the room, to simply survive, right?
Mhm.
And
Yes.
and again, what I love about these conversations on Rise and Shine Sunday each week, which I'm so grateful that the Breakthrough Show Network allows us to have this platform for these conversations that emerge. That is that thing that gets us from that awareness, which is, if that superpower is not utilized well, it turns on itself, right? And so you become paralyzed. So let's let that. Yeah, Stacy, you wanted to say.
Uh, I was following along the same thing, that whole this emergence. Um, we've talked a lot about listening,
Mhm.
and I'm thinking, is listening only one part of the awareness?
Uh-huh.
And
It is.
awareness really is the five senses, and listening is only one.
Right.
Well, I'm going to tell you what the fun part is. Awareness is my favorite topic. It's what I teach. It's what I love. So I can't wait for next week.
So you have a heightened awareness for next week, as we want everyone to here. And if you would like to join us in the roundtable discussion, that is standing invitation is there. We have plenty of rooms and circles and plenty of
Yes.
places for you to do that. And if you reach out to us, you can email us at riseandshinesundays@gmail.com. We will happily welcome you into this discussion. You may, if you wish, continue to watch us, follow the program, just contact us. But this is what I think is so important, is to be able to know that these discussions, right, require us to really listen to each other,
Mm-hmm.
speak what
Mm.
emerges. We had no idea when we began this that we were going to be talking about dancing so much, right? That we would all get a '90s flashback to Nickelodeon about being slimed, and we have a definite, recognition of what that threshold crossing looks like, where you don't want to be slimed. You just keep saying, no in your head as a visual, and I guarantee that as you practice through the week of practicing that threshold of awareness, right? Of practicing threshold awareness, excuse me. This is where you can kind of come to, and it is a discovery. Yes, Ollie.
I was just thanking you also, and Ray and Sang and Stacy and everyone listening, and Jessica. My last nuggets, and I'm going to apply to myself because I'm also learning, is to allocate time. If we don't allocate intentionally time during our days, how could we be aware? How could we be, this happens, how could I? And then journaling. But if we go through the motion, we don't have the time to reflect and to adjust. So it's really time in our agenda, journaling, and really briefing and thanking you our body.
Yeah.
That's my share.
Yeah, and that's so beautifully put, because what you're talking about, Ollie, is the different types of pauses we can do for ourselves. What does that mean? Sometimes it's the breath, sometimes it's the journaling, sometimes it's the hugging a tree. Sometimes it's eating chocolate. Anyone else have anything for the good of the hour?
I'm just going to leave you guys on a happy note about why the slime is driving me nuts. It's my unawareness, okay? So, real quick, when I was a kid, right, my little brother and my little sister, they used to make mud pies and all this stuff or whatever. And I never played in the dirt. It was not my thing. I did not play in the mud. It was disgusting. And I didn't because I remember my dad saying, little girls don't get dirty. They don't play in the mud. They don't do that. Right. But then here comes these two kids. They're playing. I'm like, guys, no, that's gross. I don't like it. Slime to me is like, oh, it's like, first of all, it's slimy. That's nasty for me. And then all of it. So that awareness of knowing, and then you giving me that visual now will literally be like, oh no, I'm about to be slimed. I am good. I don't want it. I know how to go and get my hands dirty in actual work. But for just to be frivolously playing in the dirt, you got the wrong girl. I'm not a gardener. Okay. I'm definitely not a gardener. I probably could be. I will bring you a plant, but I'm not putting my hands in the dirt for fun. So to me, it's that way. So the slime, that's what it is for me.
Great. Anyone
Mhm.
else? We've got about 30 seconds.
We have a new slogan that we'll
Yeah.
add to our list of slogans. Thanks to saying, "Say no to slime."
There
Yeah.
you go.
Yes.
And
Love
with that,
it.
with
Yeah.
that, our emergence discussion has been done on crossing thresholds. Again, we are grateful to the Breakthrough Show Network for providing us this opportunity to come into your lives and have a conversation about what's emerging. Coming up next on the Breakthrough Show Network is Spirit Sundays. We look forward to having you back here with us. We're here at whatever time may change, right? Whatever threshold you may want to cross, we are here for you. Thank you so very much for being here, and we will look forward to seeing you all back next week.